Broncos country rookie minicamp is in full effect, and this has got me super excited for this upcoming season, as I'm sure many of you are also excited. Now, of course, rookie minicamp, it's going to be only 3 days long, and when you're watching this, rookie minicamp is actually probably over. But still, it's got me super excited for this upcoming season. And as we prepare for OTAs and training camp, I wanted to go over a video of the upcoming free agents that the Broncos could lose in free agency. Because I do think it's important as we go into the season to be looking at these players who are in contract years and seeing if the Broncos might potentially re-sign him. There are a lot of key players in here, so keep an eye out for those. If you do enjoy this video, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as the support is greatly appreciated. Also, I don't mention it enough. If you want to follow me on Twitter, that's also linked in the description below. But with that being said, let's go ahead and let's jump straight in to the free agents that the Broncos could lose this upcoming season. First of all, though, I do want to go over rookie numbers came out a few days ago, and I just want to give my thoughts on them. Not that it really matters at the end of the day, but Jahdae Barron, he said today that, he's fine with 12, but it's not permanent. And I know a lot of Broncos fans have liked 12 on Jahdae Barron. I'm kind of indifferent. If he wants to change it to a lower number or keep it at 12, I'm cool with that. RJ Harvey at 37, I do believe that's going to change. I think all these numbers are really assigned to players when they get to rookie minicamp, and then as they officially make the 53-man roster, they're going to be allowed to change. I do expect Harvey to change his number from 37. Pat Bryant, I think he's going to keep it. That's what he wore at the University of Illinois, so 13 I think looks fine. Savion Jones, love the number 95. I think he might keep that one. Q Robinson at 51 is interesting. He might keep that, might change it. Jeremy Crawshaw, although he is a punter, I do expect him to change it because 39 isn't the prettiest number. If there's any single-digit numbers left, I could see him switching to that, or who knows. But Jeremy Crawshaw, I do think is going to switch from 39. And then Caleb Lohner, 84. Pretty solid number, but I could see him switching as well. It'll just depend on how things go for these rookie, or I guess what they feel with these numbers. But that's not important. Let's jump straight into this. And I'm not going to be taking too much time with these players. I'm not going to be going super in depth. This is just going to be kind of a fast fire because we've got three type of free agents coming up, right? We've got the unrestricted free agents, we've got the restricted free agents, and we've got the exclusive rights free agents, which I will explain each one before we jump into that section. So starting with unrestricted free agents, this is what you mostly think of as free agency, where players, their contract expires and they hit the open market and any team can sign them, right? They have to at least have 4 years of eligibility in the NFL where they're active for at least 6 games for that year to be completed. And they can sign with any team if they're not re-signed by the Broncos. And so the players that fall under this category are Luke Wattenberg, our starting center, who had a fairly decent season last year. It's going to depend on this season if I think the Broncos are going to bring him back or potentially draft one for the future. But Luke Wattenberg is there, as well as another, both of these players, by the way, Wattenberg and Delaren Turner-Yell, 5th-round picks back in 2022. And Turner-Yell is someone who I don't know if the Broncos are going to bring back, right? There's a lot of players in that safety room, and he just hasn't gotten a whole lot of playing time outside of special teams. So it'll be interesting to see what the Broncos do, but I think they probably move on from Turner-Yell. Then we got defensive lineman Matt Henningsen, who was a 6th-round pick in that draft, and he's been up and down the roster, been on the practice squad, has made the opening day roster a few times. It'll be interesting to see what the Broncos do there, but with the depth we've added there, I don't know if Matt Henningsen will continue with the Broncos long term. Then we got cornerback Damari Mathis, a 4th-round pick back in that 2022 draft, and I really liked Damari Mathis coming out. I thought when we got him in the 4th round, it was an amazing pick. In that rookie year, when he did get to play, he looked solid. We all had high expectations for that sophomore year, and he kind of disappointed, right? Didn't have the greatest of seasons, and then has kind of been buried on the depth chart behind guys like Pat Surtain, Jahdae Barron, Riley Moss, even I'd say Chris Abrams-Drain. So in the long term, I don't know if the Broncos keep Damari Mathis, but of course, this upcoming season, a lot of players can prove me wrong, can prove this wrong, and could be signed to long-term extensions. These are just my thoughts as we speak. Then we got offensive lineman Calvin Throckmorton, who I believe went undrafted back in 2020. And he's a guy who can play center, can play guard for you as that depth swing offensive lineman. I don't know if the Broncos, how they feel about him long term, right? There's some interesting pieces that the Broncos brought in undrafted free agency if they want to kind of bring in this youth movement. So it's interesting. Throckmorton could also play tackle for you if you needed to. He's kind of this versatile offensive lineman, in my opinion. So there's that as an upcoming unrestricted free agent. And then you got quarterback Sam Ehlinger, who's on a one-year deal, who could kind of follow a Zach Wilson type of path, being the third-string quarterback, active for emergency situations, but maybe not seeing any playing time, learning under Sean Payton, and then going elsewhere to succeed. That could be what Sam Ehlinger does. The only difference being Sam Ehlinger was signed, and we traded for Zach Wilson, right? That's really the only difference, but I could see Sam Ehlinger doing that. Or the Broncos could potentially keep him on long-term if they want him to be the future backup after Jarrett Stidham's contract expires in a few seasons. Then we got safety Sam Franklin, who we signed to a one-year deal, who is a really solid special teamer. He's a safety by trade. That room is pretty stacked as it is, right? The starters being Brandon Jones and Talanoa Hufanga. I really like J.L. Skinner. P.J. Locke is a veteran with starting experience. So there's some guys in that room. It'll be interesting to see how he performs with the Broncos. Is he going to be this elite special teamer that you want to keep on the roster? Possibly. Could he develop into a solid depth safety? Possibly as well. So Sam Franklin is a very intriguing one that I'm going to be watching for this upcoming season. Then moving on, we have fullback Michael Burton. He was brought back on a one-year deal, and he's an interesting one, right? He's getting up there in age, but he's been with Sean Payton for his tenure here in Denver, as well as some years back in New Orleans, right? He is getting up there in age, so it'll be interesting to see what the Broncos do with him. And Michael Burton has made the opening day roster, and then towards the end of the season last year, I believe he was cut, added to the practice squad, and then elevated for the remaining games. It'll be interesting, like I said, to see what the Broncos do with Michael Burton, because you have a guy in Nate Atkins who I think can play a tight end fullback hybrid role like we had with Andrew Beck a few seasons ago. But Burton, solid veteran fullback that the Broncos might want to keep around, maybe until he's ready to hang him up and retire. Then we've got edge rusher Nick Benito, and this is going to be the first major key free agent for the Denver Broncos, right? Former second-round pick, 64th overall back in 2022. It was the first year of that Russell Wilson deal. And Benito, for the first few years, he was a rotational guy, and he was developing. And then this past season, he broke out in a big way, was a very impactful player on that defense. I would say he was a top 3 important player on the defense for the Broncos last year. Obviously, you have Pat Surtain, the decoy. Then you had Zach Allen, who was a monster, and Nick Benito as well in that group. I think all 3 of those are important. 2 of them are actually upcoming free agents. We'll talk about Zach Allen here in a little bit, but Nick Benito is someone who I would strongly recommend the Broncos signing a contract extension to, and the Broncos could say, could wait till the end of the year to see how he performs this season, or wait till midseason just to see if the production dips at all, but that could be a little bit risky, right? He could perform and then, his contract goes up and then maybe he's outpriced you, right? So it'll be interesting to see, but I want Nick Benito back on the Denver Broncos. I'm hoping we can get a deal done potentially before the start of the season, but we'll have to see how the Broncos prioritize a couple of the key free agents. Then next up, we got linebacker Justin Strnad. Strnad was a 5th-round pick back in 2020 for the Broncos out of Wake Forest. And he's a guy who, when he had to come in, he played all right last season. Nothing crazy, nothing spectacular, but he's a veteran linebacker who knows the system. If you want to keep him around as a depth veteran, right, if he needs to fill in again, I think that's a solid strategy. Or the Broncos have a lot of young inside linebackers that they've signed as undrafted free agents over the past few seasons that maybe they give a chance to eventually here in the coming years. But Strnad is an interesting one on a one-year deal. And then you got defensive lineman Malcolm Roach. I would say this is actually another key free agent. When he came in, when we signed him to a deal last offseason, I was like, okay, I like it, some depth for our defensive line, but he really produced and he really made an impact last season, and he blew my expectations for him out of the water, right? He was very stout in the run game and defending the run, as well as being a reliable pass rusher from the interior. I think Malcolm Roach is a very solid player. Now it'll be interesting to see if we can keep him with all the upcoming free agents we have on the defensive line, right? Who are you going to pay? That's why you started to draft some depth. So it'll be interesting to see, but Malcolm Roach is a very solid depth player for the Broncos on the defensive line. Then you got PJ Locke, back-to-back former Texas Longhorns here. Safety out of Texas, obviously, like I just said. But he was a starter last year and kind of played iffy for me. To me, especially in that playoff game, he did struggle on the back end. I like PJ Locke as kind of that third safety who's going to rotate in, rotate out. But as a starter, I got some questions. I would love to see PJ Locke signed long-term for the Broncos, but it'll be interesting to see what they do with PJ Locke. Again, trying to move pretty quickly here. Tight end Adam Troutman is an interesting one, right? You have Evan Ingram signed to a 2-year deal. He's going to be more of a receiver than a tight end. Adam Troutman is your true hand-in-the-dirt type of tight end who is going to be a blocker as well as a receiver. And, of course, he was with Sean Payton back with the New Orleans Saints out of the University of Dayton. But Troutman could be a guy who I think the Broncos do sign to a contract extension as that pure tight end, because when you look at the roster right now, if you're excluding upcoming free agency at the end of the season and the draft, which it's way too early to predict all of those things, the only other tight ends on your roster, Evan Ingram, who's going to be a receiving threat. Then you got Caleb Lawner, who we'll have to see how he develops, but I do like him as a prospect. Then you got Lucas Kroll, Nate Atkins, all these other guys. So Adam Troutman, I could see getting a 2-3 year extension potentially for the Broncos as kind of this pure hand-in-the-dirt tight end. Then we got kicker Will Lutz, who I'd love to see back, right? I know a lot of people sometimes talk about, and it's not just the Broncos, right? Or necessarily I'm talking about the Broncos, but just looking out through NFL fandoms, there's some rookie kickers who are electric and elite right away. But a lot of times, rookie kickers struggle adjusting from college to the NFL. And so I would hope at the end of the season, the Broncos extend Will Lutz, because I want to have that reliable veteran on the roster rather than a rookie who is kind of unproven, is going to kind of just make you stress out over every single kick. Will Lutz, when he's kicking, I'm not stressed at all, right? Kind of was shaky a little bit in his first season coming to Denver, and that could be the altitude and moving from primarily being a dome kicker to outdoors. But I like Will Lutz. He's reliable, and I think the Broncos should extend him this upcoming offseason because, sometimes a rookie kicker, a young kicker can really make you stress out. But Will Lutz is an upcoming unrestricted free agent. Then we move to Alex Singleton, who could be an interesting one, and I think it's all going to depend on how that ACL is doing. I know he finished the Buccaneers game on the torn ACL, but I want to see how he's recovered from that ACL injury, because some players, they recover just fine from an ACL, and then there's players like Javonte Williams, and that hurts me because rookie year Javonte was a beast and then was never really the same after he came back. So I think it's all going to depend on how the ACL looks, because he is a reliable veteran. He's going to wrap up the tackles. He's going to help you in the run game. He's not, great at any one area, but he's a solid starting inside linebacker. But I think for the Broncos, it's all going to depend on how that ACL has healed. Then you got defensive end John Franklin Myers, who, again, is another key free agent, in my opinion, who I would like to keep in Denver long term. He was really solid when he was paired with DJ Jones and Zach Allen, made one of the better defensive line units in the league, and I would like to keep him a part of that. Now, it's going to be difficult to keep them all together, right? We just paid DJ Jones. Zach Allen needs a contract, who we'll talk about in a little bit. He needs a contract. Malcolm Roach needs a contract. There's a lot of guys who needed a contract, and I don't know if you'll be able to pay them all. Even though we'll be out of the Russell Wilson dead cap money, it'll still be tough to pay the defensive line if you want to keep that group together and still bring in other players and still re-sign other players. I think it'll be difficult, but I'd like John Franklin Myers to remain in Denver long term. Then we got wide receiver Courtland Sutton. And again, I think this is another key free agent. He's got the familiarity with Bo Nix, and you don't want to take anything away from him, right? He's going to be this guy who obviously isn't going to be crazy with the speed or the separation, but if you need it to throw a jump ball up, he's someone who's going to come down with the ball. And I think Bo Nix, while he's still young in the NFL, I think you got to keep that consistency and at least have a reliable wide receiver one on the roster, because I like Marvin Mims. I like the upside still of Troy Franklin. I like Pat Bryant. There's some guys who are on the roster who I really do like, but I think you have to have this you have to consider having a veteran presence like Sutton on the team who is going to be reliable, who's going to know the offensive playbook. I think Sutton is going to be one that the Broncos do have to prioritize in the offseason. Or not just necessarily in the offseason, but re-signing with the Broncos. Then you got Zach Allen, and this is a big one. I think Zach Allen was one of the most important pieces on that defense, right? Obviously, Patrick Surtain won Defensive Player of the Year, but Zach Allen, I would say, had an impact on that by getting pressure on the quarterback and making an impact. Getting pressure on the quarterback, whether that's a sack, whether that's a quarterback hit, whether that's a pressure, whether that's a hurry, disrupting the pass in any way possible, as well as stopping the run. Zach Allen was on another level last year. And I think, in my opinion, if I had to prioritize one of these key free agents, and it is really, really difficult to decide, but I think I would prioritize getting his extension done with Zach Allen, because he is a very, very, very impactful player on this defense, and he is one of the reasons why the defense was so elite last year. So to me, I want to get an extension done with Zach Allen. Next up, we are moving to the restricted free agents, and these are players who have completed 3 years, right? 3 years of service time in the NFL. You most commonly see restricted free agents in the NHL, which is the other sport I primarily watch. And what happens if there's a restricted free agent? Well, the Broncos have the rights to the player, but they can be offer sheeted by other teams. And if they're offer sheeted by other teams and they sign a contract and they go to that other team, then the Broncos would be awarded with draft compensation from that team. Or if they sign an offer sheet and the Broncos want to keep them around, they have the right to match that offer. Then that player would stay and remain with the Broncos. Players that fall into this category are tight end Nate Atkins, who is kind of that tight end fullback hybrid we saw, like I mentioned, with Andrew Beck a few years ago. And he got more involved in the offense as the season went on last year. Then you got running back Jaleel McLaughlin, who you could argue was the team's RB1 last season, with just the fall off of Javonte Williams, Audric Esme's being a rookie and struggling to hold on to the ball in the early part of the year. You could argue he was the RB1 in that running back room, and he's someone who I like the skill set of, who I wouldn't mind the Broncos keeping here for a few more years and long term. And then you got Alex Palczewski, who is an undrafted free agent tackle out of the University of Illinois, and I really liked him as our swing tackle, someone who maybe could take over for Garrett Bowles if he goes and retires in the future. Again, he is on the other side of 30, right? Garrett Bowles is, but I don't know if he is going to retire, and I would love him to stay and play with the Broncos, but I do like Palczewski as even a swing tackle. So Palczewski is someone who I like and would love for the Broncos to keep here long term. Then you got wide receiver A.T. Perry, who has been with the Saints for a majority of his career and then was signed to the practice squad after he was released in like the middle of the season last year. Then we got cornerback Jaquan McMillan, who I would like to see stick around long term, but with the addition of Jahdae Barron, I do wonder if this might be the end of the road for McMillan, just because it'll be interesting. Has he lost his starting spot? And if he has, will he want to remain long term? I mean, he is a restricted free agent, so the Broncos could match the offer sheet, right? But it'll be interesting. I like Jaquan McMillan. I liked him as a starter. Maybe didn't have the greatest end to the season last year, but I thought he played pretty solid for the Broncos. And even if he wasn't a starter, I like him as a depth corner, but I think he's proven that he can be a starter in this league. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens with Jaquan McMillan, but I'd like to keep him around long term. Then you got safety Tanner McAllister, who has been on the practice squad the past few years, depth DB, and it'll just be interesting to see if the Broncos want to keep him as a depth guy or whatnot. But Tanner McAllister is a restricted free agent this upcoming season. Then you got tight end Lucas Kroll, who I know a lot of people are still pretty high on. I'm not super high on Lucas Kroll, but if you do like him as a potential Adam Troutman replacement, then, I mean, I don't hate it, right? I don't know if he's he wouldn't be the primary target, right? But I don't mind Lucas Kroll if the Broncos wanted to keep him long term. Then you have the exclusive rights free agents, where it's 2 or less years of service time in the NFL, and the Broncos can offer sheet them and bring them back to the team. And the players that fall under this category are running back Tyler Bidet, who it's interesting because I can't remember what year. I think it was 21 or 22. He was a 6th-round pick by the Ravens, released, signed to our practice squad, activated for the final year. So he's been in the league for a while, but I don't think he's past that 6-game threshold to make him a restricted free agent or an exclusive rights free agent. But Bidet is someone who I do like as a player who can be in our running back room as a depth runner, kind of as that RB4, maybe behind Harvey, McLaughlin, and Estime. Do like Bidet, and it'll be interesting to see what happens with him. I hope that back is healed. I can't remember if it was a back, but he suffered a scary injury against the Jets. I believe it was like a back spine injury with the way he was carted off. So I hope everything is fine. I hope he's fully healed, and I would love to keep him in Denver as kind of a depth running back. Then you got Lavelle Bailey, who was a UDFA from last year, who made the active roster and then was on the practice squad. I think he got cut. I can't remember why. I think we brought in a player. I can't remember exactly who at this moment, but Lavelle Bailey is an intriguing option who I think the Broncos, who he could potentially make the Broncos active roster this year, but we'll have to see. And then you got KJ Cloyd, someone who the Broncos signed to their practice squad in the middle of the season last year. Then you got Jordan Miller, who's been with the Broncos for a little bit as a depth defensive lineman. You got Quentin Newsome, a depth corner who I really liked in the preseason last year. I'm interested to see how he's going to perform this year. You got guard Will Sherman, who has been with us for a little bit, as you can tell by the old unis right there. Then you got Reese Taylor, another depth corner who was a UDFA last year, I believe. Tight end Thomas Yasmin, who was a UDFA out of Utah, but I believe is from Australia. And so when he was put on the practice squad, he was given a 17th spot for an international player on the practice squad. Then you got running back Blake Watson, who I'm still super high on, who was an undrafted free agent out of Memphis last year. Thought he was going to have more of an impact last year. Didn't really have the impact I expected, but I still like Blake Watson as a player. You got edge Andrew Farmer, who has been on the practice squad. Obviously, you can see he was formerly with the Chargers. Then you got safety Devin Key, who was on the roster last year, and it'll be interesting to see how he or what the impact is this year. Is he going to make the depth chart as a safety, or is he going to be a practice squad guy? And I think that could be a big key on what the Broncos do. But again, it's exclusive rights free agent, so they could bring him back and have him on the practice squad if they wanted to. And then you got Keydron Smith, another UDFA. Dondre Tillman, who was signed to, I believe it was a 3 or 4 year contract in last offseason out of the UFL. And then I believe he was cut and added to the practice squad and then eventually made the active roster. So he's no longer obviously on that 3-year contract, but someone who I do think the Broncos like as a kind of rotational 4th edge rusher, who I think the Broncos would love to bring back. Wrong way. Then you got Michael Bandy, who's been a guy who's been with the Broncos for the past few seasons as well. He's been with the Chargers, kind of a smaller, faster receiver, right, who has been on the practice squad and kind of that practice squad extra receiver. Then the final one right here is going to be Jordan Jackson, who's been with us for a while, as you can tell with those. I guess not a while. I think it was Sean Payton's first year back in 2023. But he's someone who I do like. I believe out of the I believe, out of the Air Force Academy, who I do think could potentially push for a roster spot, but with how we've beefed up that defensive line, I do think it's going to be tough. But yes, those are all of the upcoming free agents for the Denver Broncos. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below of who you want to keep on the roster. I think for me, the key ones that the Broncos need to target, and these aren't the only ones they need to target, right? But I think Jaquan McMillan could be one. It'll be interesting to see how things play out with obviously him potentially losing his starting spot. But then you have Zach Allen, who I think the Broncos need to prioritize. Cortland Sutton, as well as think they need to prioritize. John Franklin Myers, I'd like to keep around. Will Lutz, I'd like to keep around. Ideally Malcolm Roach, but Nick Bonito. I think Nick Bonito, Zach Allen, and Cortland Sutton are the three big targets that you need to target to bring back. But that's my opinion. If you did enjoy, make sure you leave a like and subscribe to the channel down below, as the support is greatly appreciated. And if you want to follow my Twitter, that is linked in the description below as well. But thank you so much for watching. My name is Parker, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.